next, we are talking about the latest series of The Crown, which is on Netflix. Joining me now is Dr Tessa Dunlop, a royal commentator. Now, Tessa, thank you so much for joining us here today on TalkTV. Now, I'm going to let you into a little secret. I haven't yet caught up on the latest series. What are the revelations that I will be enjoying on my Netflix accounts when I eventually get some time off over Christmas?
Well, I shouldn't worry. It's come in two parts. I think that's to make sure that Netflix gets a subscription for 2 months in a row. So the first 4 episodes were released in November, and now we've had the last 6. And worry not, even hardcore committed fans such as myself managed to get through to the very end yesterday. It's quite long. The very final episode, episode 10, which incidentally, none of us were allowed a sneak peek of until they dropped yesterday morning. And I feel that the royals, particularly in this final part of Series 6, have been fairly soft-soaped. You know, it's a bit like wearing a pair of reading glasses that aren't your own. Everything's slightly out of focus because we've lived this, Jake. Most of us remember it. Obviously, we weren't privy to the personal conversations, but we remember the history that panned out around us. And it just, for me, some of it slightly jarred. It just didn't quite stack up. But my real bone of contention, obviously I enjoyed it anyway, but is that Peter Morgan's current fetish for casting the outsider, in the first part Mohammed Al-Fayed, and in the second part Carole Middleton, as the baddie, if you like, the Iago. And I found that a bit disquieting, to be honest.
The slightly sort of weird thing about this for people who want to watch it is it's a bit like a sort of docudrama, isn't it? Because it's all stuff that, you know, has happened very, very recently and we all remember watching our TV screens. Is there just a bit of a pretense that this is completely accurate when in fact that we know it's not? And isn't that doing a massive disservice to the royal family?
I think that overall, all 60 episodes taken as a whole, which they will be historically when we look back, have been a huge boon for the royal family. They've kept them up there in among the A-listers, as opposed to down around with the bicycling monarchies of Sweden and Denmark, etc. And I think it's really important to recognize that that sort of magic and sparkle, you can't pay for it. It also draws in a global audience, and it draws in a younger audience, which the royal family are struggling to connect with. So I think that on that level, it's been an incredible boon in terms of the status of our most recognizable exported brand. So certainly for Britain, it's been a win. But what was interesting was Peter Morgan has gone more gently on the royals. There was no lack of controversy in these latter years, whether it was Camilla and Charles, whether it was Prince Harry, whether it's more recently, but actually he's really drawn in his claws, and he's used instead Mohammed Al-Fayed and Carole Middleton, outsiders, people who couldn't possibly, by the way, give him a knighthood. He's used them as the individuals to kind of deliver the tension. And I felt it was very unfair and almost a bit sexist to cast Carole Middleton as this kind of Iago person, where she is frantically social climbing and trying to make sure that her daughter marries the prince. It just didn't fully stack up for me.
And of course, Carole Middleton hasn't got the opportunity to defend herself. So in your judgment, then, she comes off the worst out of all the targets that have been identified.
Yeah, she does, actually. And I particularly felt sorry for her because the royal family are protected. And I think Harry has probably subsequently discovered this by an incredible sort of institutional wall. First of all, I think part of them, and certainly the Queen did this, I don't know if the younger ones are as good at it, detaching themselves from the institution they represent. So the kind of flack and the noise and the nonsense, it kind of, to an extent, is just stonewalled. But if you're Carole Middleton, you're not used to this. You haven't had the lifelong training. You've not been born in a goldfish bowl. And while they can just carrying on because they're kind of born into the role, how is she meant to respond? I mean, of course she won't, out of loyalty to her daughter and so forth. But I also thought, Jake, it was kind of a bit sexist. And also there was a snobbishness about this idea that, you know, if you're from a working class or you've made your money recently, that you would somehow be so covetous. And would a man, would the father-in-law have been cast in that way? No, it was very much the sort of Elizabeth Bennet kind of type caricature. And I felt uncomfortable for her and for Kate. It was to slightly undermine the idea of genuine love between William and Kate, which Peter Morgan did try and slip in there. But Yeah, I mean, obviously that they're looking for drama, aren't they? They're looking for fresh angles and a story that we all know so well. I say this, it's a bit like Sour Grapes because I have enjoyed it. Although with what's unfolding today outside the High Court, I do think, do we need dramas like The Crown sometimes with our own royal family? You know, they're constantly, if you like, the kind of the most staggering drama has been the departure of Harry and Meghan since 2020, this extraordinary funeral that was kind of like a super death. You know, in a way, how can drama even compete?
I agree with you. I think it's a bit mean-spirited towards Carole Middleton from what you tell us. Look, no real revelations in this. The one thing I picked up on was the fact that William is alleged, but I think we knew about it anyway because it was in his book, The Spare, to have encouraged Prince Harry to basically be a bit of a wally, which all young people are, and wear that Nazi uniform that outraged the British press. But, I mean, that's not a revelation. That's just sort of reaffirming what Harry's already written about in his book, The Spare, isn't it?
Yeah, funnily enough, I thought that, again, that just sort of, you know, happened. It was portrayed. It wasn't such a biggie, partly because we know what happened. For me, editorially, I thought the most significant bit of this last six was the focus on William, the will mania, the kind of building of his character, his pending marriage, although we don't ever get to the marriage, but this kind of courtship with Kate, his relationship with his father, and the way that that was the centerpiece, the cornerstone of a series called The Crown. The clue is in the title. And Harry very much being the side narrative, even when you finally get to the Nazi costume, it's really a sort of there, Harry moment. And it reaffirms what we know was subsequently Harry's pain, this kind of slightly pointless role that he was gifted courtesy of his birth. And the other parallel story in this series is Margaret and her pitiful death, her series of strokes, and really her fairly unhappy life. And I think it does throw into sharp relief, if you like, the massive fault line in monarchy, which two of Kate and William's children are going to have to confront. What do you do if you're the spare? It's all well and good if you're Princess Anne, you just get on with the job, you were born to do so, you're just like your father, and it was easier being a daughter to Philip than it was a son anyway. But actually, if you're an Andrew or a Harry or a Margaret, there is this kind of existential crisis that they seem to live with. And I think it's incredibly difficult to define that role in an era when people are going to be putting on you, wanting to catch a moment with you. We live in a 24/7 media society. If you're protected and you're going to become the king like George is, that's fine. But for the other two rolling around out there like the rest of us, it's far harder.
It's a bit difficult. Thank you, Dr Tessa Dunlop.